Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Strong Life Podcast. We are on with Dr. Ken Kinakin, founder of the Swiss Symposium. Ken, thank you for being here. I've known about you for probably 2 decades. Yep, 2 decades. Same thing with our mutual friend, Matt Nickel. I heard of him and then finally connected through the podcast. And, early 2000s when I got into strength and conditioning kind of full time. Some of my mutual friends were speaking at your symposium, which was Dave Tate and Jim Wendler. And Dave always had this like hilarious thing where he would always miss his flight to Canada going to the symposium. And so he would always drive. It was just, to me, it was like, I always tell him, I go, Dave, that's my favorite story. So I need you to repeat it every year. I've never missed or came close to missing a flight in my life. So I just imagine he didn't want to fly.
Well, no, what had happened is that he showed up, I think 5 minutes, too short. Like they have a 2-hour to board. And they said, you can't go on. He says, well, why not? And they let other people and they wouldn't let him on. So instead of him canceling, which has happened before with other presenters, he said, screw it. He jumped in the truck and drove 8 hours.
I know. I learned
and he didn't tell anyone really. And I found out sideways and I went, you drove up here? He says, yeah, I didn't want to miss it. I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to let everyone down. And I went, holy moly, that's class.
I know. There's a lot, Dave is really, I've always kind of like the way I referred to him is, people view him a lot in the powerlifting sense, but I feel like since I've known him in the early 2000s, he was more of like a fatherly figure to me and probably many others in this industry about kind of the direction you take and, the class, being classy, being genuine. Yes. And so, success is no accident. So Ken, give our listeners, viewers, a little bit of a background on you're a chiropractor, but the Swiss Symposium, something to be done for, I don't know how long you've done it, tell us. From what I know, about 20 years, but most people cannot do a seminar, let alone a large symposium, more than like 3-4 years in a row. And you're going, 2+ decades or so. So I'd like to hear the history and your background.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Kelowna, British Columbia, in Canada. So on the west coast of on Canada there. And I competed a lot in bodybuilding when I was younger, in my teenage years. And at that time, I left it. And because I was a teenager and everything else, I left it primarily because of the anabolic drug situation. Everyone was on drugs. I was too young. I didn't want to get into it. And I was fairly strong. So then I went into powerlifting, only to find that powerlifting was just as bad, if not worse.
What years? What kind of years were these?
This was in the 80s.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, early 1980s. And actually, I started my first bodybuilding competition was in the late 70s, and then I'm 58 now. So if you're trying to figure out the math,
okay.
And so I started competing in the bodybuilding, loved it, and everything else. But then I shifted over into the powerlifting, and really enjoyed that. The one thing that I didn't like about the bodybuilding was that it was very subjective. So if someone was a little bit bigger but smoother, and I was smaller and more cut, like, how do you decide that? And a lot of it was, who was friends and everything else of that nature. In powerlifting, pretty hard to get screwed that way. So if you lift a weight, you lift it. And so there was less problems that way. And so I competed in powerlifting and won the BC champion. I set a bunch of records in British Columbia and Western Canada, and competed in the States in the 148, 165, and 181 class at that time. And in 1983, I was getting ready for the Canadian Powerlifting Championships. And 2 weeks before, at that time at 165, I was squatting about 525. And I was trying to just warming up with, and when I went up to about 400 pounds, I felt my right knee. It sounded like a bed sheet ripping. And I went, oh no. So I had to pull out of the competition, and which was really unfortunate. but also fortunate because I found the biggest problem was to try and find someone that could help me with my knee problem. Went to the medical doctor. He said, you know what? There's a slight tear in your patellar tendon, but just don't squat anymore, and just do leg extension. And I went, they're not going to drag a leg extension machine onto the platform. So medical doctors and therapists and chiropractors, a lot of times they don't understand the mentality of an athlete, especially when it's their own sport. And so I went to everyone. I went to a physiotherapist, went to massage, tried to figure out 8-9 months later, I was back to 400-pound squat, but I couldn't squat anymore. It was too painful. And I could run and jump and everything else. There was no pain, but I couldn't lift. And it was only on my right knee. And everyone was blaming the squat. And I went, no, because my left knee is okay.
Right.
Something is wrong. So finally, my dad, he goes, why don't you go see my chiropractor? I went, why? It's my knee. It's not my back. He says, go. So I went. And Dr. Merv Ritchie, and he did muscle testing on me. And Merv was a marathon runner. He was maybe $130. His arm was about this big. He was a tiny little guy. I'm all jacked, just, super strong theoretically. And right leg, no strength whatsoever in any of the muscles that he tested. On the left-hand side, he couldn't budge it. And so he took x-rays and everything else, and we could see, there was a pelvic torque, the lumbar spine was off and everything else. And so he said, you know what, your knee healed up a long time ago, but you're being inhibited from your lower back. And I went, okay. So after literally 3 weeks of treatment, I was back squatting over 500, no pain. So I sent him a bunch of patients, but he didn't really understand weight training. So I said, screw it. So I went to chiropractic college myself and just applied everything to weight training and learned as much as possible. And in 1991, I graduated and then started teaching and everything else of that nature on rehab and weight training to different courses and in different gyms and whatnot. And I just found when I was teaching the trainers, they were trying to fix things. And when I was teaching the doctors and the chiropractors, they were trying to give really bad weight training advice, like, don't do squats, bad for the knees.
Still.
Yeah.
Still do.
It's still there. And so in 1999, I said, screw it, I'm going to do a giant experiment and bring both professions into the same seminar. Because usually you go to a chiropractic seminar where we just talk about treatment, or you go to, say, an NSCA conference, and you just talk about training and everything else. But no one had actually put together anything as far as how do you treat injuries, especially weight training injuries, because they're different than, say, a collision type of or a shear type of injury that we see in football or in hockey. And the doctors could find out, how do you train properly? Oh, you mean squats are okay? So that was the start of it. And then just over the years, I started doing it in 2000 and 2001, 2002, 2003, we had SARS here in Toronto, so I had to cancel it. And did it in 2004 and 2005. And what I found was the internet kind of took over the information.
Right.
And so big seminars and symposiums weren't as helpful. And I do it all by myself. I don't have any sponsors. Every single symposium, you can talk to Matt about it. He knows the whole story. But, I've lost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars doing these symposiums because I wanted to make it cost effective for people. And I also paid the presenters really well, took really good care of them. And because of that, they allowed me to record them. And so, that way that I have a lot of videos of people that really weren't videotaped in seminars before, which is pretty cool.
Right. Like who, Charlie Francis, or was he?
Charlie Francis, Mel Siff,
Yes.
got Lee Haney,
Wow.
Dorian Yates, lots on Mauro Di Pasquale. I'm the only person that has any videos on Mauro Di Pasquale.
It's, Dr. Ken, go back to 1999 because the internet, I was putting stuff on the internet around 2002. 99 was really, so how did you get the word out? What was your, marketing technique for the first symposium?
Well, yeah. So the internet really wasn't there. So it was just strictly word of mouth, and then also mailing. So I would spend, probably $5 to $10 to $15,000 just on mailing. I've gone as high as $50 to $70,000 just on stamps. So it costs a lot in order to do that. And over the years, it turned into more of the internet. So in 2005, because of just financially wasn't able to do it anymore. So I took off 10 years. I thought someone else would do it and put it together. And whenever I went anywhere, people were like, "Hey, you going to put it together again?" And I went, I don't know.
Interesting. So for 10
would
years,
always go, "You sure you want to do that again?" I went, So in 2015, I thought, you know what, let's do it again. And that's when I started doing the symposium again and doing multiple streams. Before, I would only do 2 or 3 streams, a treatment stream and a training stream.
Right.
I opened it up and had a nutrition, rehab, treatment, training, and then also one that I called the underground, which was sort of cutting edge, different things that don't fit, in that. And
like
some
what
unique concepts.
What would be underground?
Blood flow restriction.
Yeah.
Like sort of training, but is it training? Is it treatment? It
Right.
doesn't really fit in. Yeah. We have regenerative medicine. So you got PRP, stem cells. So in 2016, one of my patients, he was benching about 800 at the time, and he tore his pec. So it was 10 centimeters long, 4 centimeters wide, 5 centimeters deep. The guy was 350. He was a big dude.
Yeah.
And so I sent him to a friend of mine, Dr. Stoddard, who did PRP and also stem cells and under diagnostic ultrasound. And it actually filled in enough that literally within about 8-9 months, he was back benching around 700. Well, we actually brought him onto stage, and in real time, like they spun the blood right there.
Wow.
They got the PRP. We brought in the ultrasound, and we did the injections right on stage, so people could actually see what does PRP treatment look like in real time. So we were doing some pretty innovative stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently got PRP. So, long story short, like 5 years ago or so, my knee started feeling, tight, kind of getting out of the car tight. And my right knee had already had 3 surgeries, but otherwise felt good. I could run a 5K or squat 400 plus and started getting tight. And then, 2 years ago, really just the pain got very bad, like unable to, like when you have to cross the street, jog, I can't really, drive off of it. And so I had done different kinds of chiropractic and acupuncture and massage, and it would work one time and not work the next time. And so a friend of mine, she got PRP and stem cell for her knee. So she wasn't sure what exactly worked, along with what is those the injections? They're like a bacterial injection. You mix it with water. I'm forgetting. You could purchase them from like a wellness institute. It slipped my mind, but she had a lot of these injections done to her knee. She had torn her ACL, MCL, and it got better. So I did the Orthovisc shots. You know what those are, Doc?
Yeah.
3 Orthovisc shots, no improvement. It just got worse. And then the PRP got the blood spun and not an ounce of improvement. But my doctor said, like, nothing's a guarantee, so unfortunately I'm going to have to get it fixed. I was trying to do as much alternative. So, go ahead. What would you say?
And that's the best way to do it. You want to start with, the least invasive type of treatment.
Right.
So, a lot of people, they're like, they get knee injury, and they're like, oh, maybe I have to have surgery. No, let's do everything. And then when we run out of options, then you can go, whether it be regenerative medicine or whether it be any type of operation or anything else of that nature.
Yeah. Oh, I know the peptides.
Peptides. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she utilized a lot of, modalities. And so it's interesting. What's interesting is how the body, a treatment to me may not work on somebody else, whether it's
Yes.
a back adjustment or, an injection. So I'm always so, my mind is blown at the individual response to even training and nutrition and how people's thought process can influence. So, for example, some people just they are so adamant and against injury that it's almost as if their body heals because they just refuse to believe that they're going to get another surgery. So sometimes you'll hear, like my buddy John Wellborn playing the NFL, he doesn't have an ACL and he feels fine. And so some people can have no ACL and have issues, and vice versa. So let's talk about some of the names you mentioned. I'm always intrigued because you've gotten into this earlier than me. I got into the bodybuilding in the late 80s, so 89, 90. I remember in Canada they had the North American, that was the
Yep.
the pro bodybuilding show. And do you remember the TV show American Muscle Magazine on ESPN?
Yes.
So
Yep.
I mentioned it to Matt, he didn't, so he's obviously not so serious.
He's also younger.
Yeah. So I laughed. I told him I would cut school to record, but they would have Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale speak on, vitamins and just, he was just talking about things that as a teenager were way over my head. Him, as well as I mentioned to you through email, John Perillo, his
Yep.
training methods. Did John ever speak at your symposium?
No. I spent some time with John. Actually, we were at the Canadian Bodybuilding Championships,
Yeah.
and he had one of his clients that was competing, and so he was sitting there and prejudging. And you've been to enough contests that you sit there for literally hours. So I sat with John for about 4 or 5 hours. And we got along famously, talked to him about his fascial stretching, some of his unique ideas on training. And what I liked about John is that he was always kind of pushing the envelope. He was one of the first to actually use, the skin fold calipers, called it the body stat. I have it. And then he started the books, the Perillo
Performance
nutrition
menu.
Yeah. So he was looking at, how do you modify someone's dietary aspect to find out how do they respond.
Right.
And, you'd start with the calories, and you can modify it and how you can change it. And these were the days of the Dan Duchesne and Mauro Di Pasquale and everyone else. And a good example as far as nutrition is my brother. My brother has competed in bodybuilding. And when he was in his 40s, he was about 250 pounds. So he went on the classic, and this would have been a Perillo style diet, where it was, higher carb, medium protein, lower fat. Nothing happened. Didn't lose any weight. So then he went on kind of a Barry Sears, who had, the zone diet, which was more 30, 30, 30, maybe lost 5 pounds. Then he went on Di Pasquale's diet, which was the anabolic diet. And so it was about 70% fat, 25% protein, 5% carbs.
Right.
He got down to probably 195 pounds and was cut, ripped, and this was all drug-free. He was in a drug-free competition. His wife at the same time, Simone, went in the same competition, and she tried to do the high-fat diet. Literally within about 2 weeks, she thought she was going to die. So it just did not work whatsoever for her. So she went more on the 30, 30, 30 type diet, got down to about 8-9% body fat, striations on the abs, looked fantastic. The unique part of this is my brother's personality. He was always on edge. And so aggressive at times, sarcastic, at times can be a bit of a dick, especially to me. So anyways, he was competing that weekend in Vancouver. I flew to Vancouver to teach a bunch of doctors. And so I had breakfast with him, and I'm talking to him, and it's as if it's a different human being. He was nice. He was kind. He was considerate. And I looked to his wife, Simone, and went, who the hell is this? This is not, the same brother. She says, yeah, I know, he's nice. So he competed, he placed second, did really well. We went out to Dairy Queen afterwards. He had 2 banana splits. Within a half an hour, the prick was back.
Oh,
his personality had completely shifted. So that showed me a dramatic change of not only can you, the biochemical individuality is so enormous. And that's why Morrow's diet with the high fat diet sometimes works. Sometimes, the Perillo diet sometimes works. Sometimes the higher protein, the keto, the paleo, it goes on and on and on. And what we don't look at is the biochemical individuality as far as enzymes. My brother is phenomenal at metabolizing fat. So his diet now is steaks and salads and everything else. He's calm. He looks great, fantastic shape. He's in his 60s. So you can maintain that, and it works. And his blood fat, lipids, and everything else, fantastic. You'd think that they would be off. Other people, doesn't work. For me, I'm probably more of a 30-30-30 type diet where, I can change it and depending on what I want to do and how I want to lose weight. But that showed me the power of that in nutrition.
Even with, I have 2 kids, so I speak with my wife about this often, about certain foods in our house spurs a unique behavior between our kids. And there's a Dairy Queen near our house. So when you said that, I think about if my kid gets something from Dairy Queen or they go out with their friends and they have, they start eating ice cream or they stop at a Starbucks. And I just noticed that behavior changes when they're consuming, I call it crap food. That's what I call that. And also, Doc, just the names that you mentioned. So if we go back to Dr. Ronald DePasquale, when I feel like he was the original, aside from Vince Gironda, for the ketogenic diet. And yep. I don't know if you've seen the article. I did a video on it from a strength and health magazine in the late 60s. It was called the Definition Diet. I think John McCallum wrote it. And it was basically 2 large meals a day of steak, eggs, whole milk, and veggies, on greens, salads. So interesting how some of that stuff came back through the internet. And then, of course, when I think of Dr. DePasquale, it's like, if only he had a marketing person who can put his information out to the masses, but it's really only kind of us undergrounders who know about him.
But he had a pretty big impression here up in Canada. Yes. Probably not as big in the United States because again, he was manufacturing it. But he always wanted the highest quality, and it still does. The supplements are, one of the best that is out there. And his training, styles and understanding. He's just, I had the great fortune or great unfortune to actually compete against him in 1984 at the Canadian Powerlifting Championships. Right. And he just destroyed me. It was just, so anyways, he's just enormously strong, always has been, and very giving with all of his information. He's helped me out a lot. He's helped Matt out a lot. Right. He helped Matt with his BioSteel formulations, and so did Dr. Eric Serrano, a number of different people, but just a wealth of knowledge on all different levels, especially with the drugs. He was the very first one to stand up and basically say, listen, the drug testing doesn't work, and he actually even wrote a book about it, and they actually, because he did, they kind of kicked him off the drug testing committee here in Canada. But he was just saying, listen, it's not that hard to beat the test, so why don't you raise your standards, on that? And they're getting better and better. I don't know whether or not the drug testing is the solution. People are going to do whatever they're going to do. And I just treat enough people that have gone into natural contests and they're not natural. They just know they can't win. Right. These are low character people where they know they can't win in a normal competition, so they go into a drug-free competition, being on drugs, so they can win.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's
like,
heartbreaking.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just, people are really trying hard to do it, drug free. And if you want to take drugs, fine. If you don't want to take drugs, that's fine. And
right.
there's actually a number of federations in powerlifting that have a drug tested category and a non-drug tested category. And I competed one a couple of years ago, and it was fantastic. Because it was none of this in powerlifting. If someone looks a certain way, and it's a normal federation where they drug test everyone, and you look, oh, he looks like he's on drugs, and wonder what he's taking, and all this other nonsense, because they're stronger than you.
Right.
And at this competition, hell, you walk up to them and you say, are you on drugs? Yeah. You want to buy some? They're just so forthright. They'll tell you exactly what they
Yeah,
take.
it's interesting now too, Doc, is how, so you were probably like a decade ahead of me with all of the experiences, because I'm almost 45. So, back then steroids were kind of like on the hush hush, it was, somebody would get it for you. Now everybody's so open, or you go to your doctor and just get testosterone replacement, and it's like, so it's people are quite open about it. So it's just interesting.
Well, I think we're starting to see that, unfortunately, testosterone has been so demonized. And so in Swiss 2016, I decided to do a steroid panel where I would have all the top bodybuilders,
Oh yeah,
PhDs,
I
doctors,
saw
and
a clip.
everyone else.
Christian
So
Thibodeau, I think, was on that panel, right?
that I was in 2018. So
Okay,
in
I saw a
2016,
clip.
no one had ever done it before.
Right.
So um, I had Dr. Eric Serrano. I had Victoria Felkar. She's very knowledgeable in the world. Dr. Victor Prisk, Rick Collins, one of the top lawyers as far as with anabolic steroids and everything else. Had Dr. Darren Willoughby there also talking about it. Dr. Scott Stevenson, who works a lot with John Meadows. And I wanted to see if I can get some different athletes there. So I found Ben Johnson, the sprinter in Canada, who got caught. And so I said, 2 weeks before the competition, or before the symposium, I said, can you come out to present? He said, yeah, I'll come out. He was pretty forthright. So half hour before I was going to do this panel discussion, I go out into the hotel lobby, and Bill Kazmaier is talking to Dorian Yates. They were both there presenting for me.
Wow.
And Kaz, he goes, Ken, Dorian's pissed off at you. I look at Dorian and go, why? And he says, you didn't ask him to go on the steroid panel. And I looked at Dorian and went, do you want to go on? He says, yeah, I have some stuff to say. So I look at Kaz, and I've known Kaz well enough. I said, do you want to go on? He says, I don't know what to say. And I said, you know what? You can just sit there. And I know Kaz well enough that he's not just going to sit there. So I had the fastest man in the world,
Right.
had one of the top bodybuilders in the world, and I had one of the strongest men of all time on the panel. And this thing was just unbelievable because it was open, it was forthright, it was honest. It was the very first time that Dorian, on video, basically admitted to taking drugs. He'd done it on, I think it was in muscular development. He talked about it, as far as, but he basically explained how much he took, how long, the benefits, and everything else. Same thing with Kaz. Kaz basically said, this is what I did, and everyone was forthright. And the session was only supposed to go on for 90 minutes, an hour and a half. We went for 3 hours. And it was such a great presentation in the sense of the challenge that we have is the anabolics now most of them are counterfeit, about 90%. And so you don't know what you're getting, and no one's really getting tested. And the doctors really aren't educated in working with these different athletes. So that's the challenge that you have. How do you do it intelligently, smart? So, the whole focus was this has to go back into the hands of the physicians. People have to learn on how to become educated and get tested, properly, because you can really screw yourself up.
What would they get tested for? Like while you were talking about this, Doc, I'm thinking about the bodybuilders who have passed from, think about like Momo Benaziza, Andreas Munzer. I think they were on a lot of diuretics, so maybe they were dehydrated. But then you have the kind of, now you're not a competitor, you're a social media guy. So like Rich Piana. So what should they be getting tested for? I don't think
Well,
my
you
listeners are,
yeah,
steroid
the
users,
biggest
but just
thing is
interesting.
you want to stay on top of your liver. Can
Liver
you
enzymes.
Yeah, liver enzymes. Kidney is really important. You want to make sure that your triglycerides and your HDL, LDL, is really, really staying, because the whole thing is that, can your body actually handle it? And then the levels that some of these people are taking, male and female, is so, we don't know whether or not your body can actually handle it. And so you can end up, and especially with women, because of the high testosterone levels, all of a sudden they lose their cycle, their whole menstrual cycle is thrown off. All the hormones, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen, everything is thrown off. And in fact, the amount of anti-estrogens that they're taking. And so after they finish competing, if they do 3 to 5 years competing, they've completely messed up their system. And so how do you reactivate that, and how do you restore that? And that
Can
can
they
take,
do it
that doesn't
without,
take weeks or even months. That can sometimes takes years, because
can
sometimes they
they,
sort of go, I want to have kids.
right? Can like former steroid users who are very heavy, can they go back to, I guess, quote unquote, normal eating, normal training, like a 30-30-30 style eating, and kind of reclaim regular testosterone levels? So sometimes you'll hear people say, like Mark Bell is open. He goes, I take testosterone because when I was younger and powerlifting, I took a lot of steroids. I don't even know what he took, but he says, now I go on testosterone therapy.
Yeah. Well, and that's the testing. What are your hormones like? So do you actually need it? As you age, it's going to drop. And so that's the important part. And that's the demonization of the actual testosterone, is that it doesn't need to be demonized. It can be used intelligently. Unfortunately, anabolic steroids, I saw this one sort of meme. Anabolic steroids is the only drug that's out there that will make you win a world championship. So that's the challenge that we actually have, is that you have this drug that will be so helpful, but the challenge is that it's combined with the actual sport of winning, and winning at a high level. Like, I mean, all of a sudden you can make multi-million dollars. We saw that in the 90s with the whole baseball aspect.
Right.
All of a sudden these baseball players just got super jacked and
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah. Mark McGuire and the
Yeah.
Jose Canseco.
Yep.
Also, we've seen, and certainly you've seen it, when Lee Haney was winning the Mr. Olympia, he was 235, 242. I believe Arnold, they said, was like 235. And then I'm sure you recall they did the tested Olympia and everybody was much smaller. Do you remember when they tested the Mr. Olympia?
I was there.
Okay. Was that in Helsinki?
That was in Chicago.
Oh, that's right. Chicago. So, Mike Quinn was like so waterlogged, and Lee Labrada, I believe, still took
They all looked bad. They all looked bad.
It was bad. Some guys just opted not to compete. I think it was Mike Christian, I don't know, but it was kind of heartbreaking. I was a teenager. I may have been that may have been 91. Am I roundabout correct? And, I had grown up reading Flex and Muscular Development. And of course, reading Bob Kennedy's he had those great like bodybuilding books, like, Built and Maxi Cut Legs. And those guys from the 80s were they were so thick built. And like Tim Belknap, right? I think he was a diabetic. But anyway, it was just, I saw the effects of steroids, and I got to see it also training at gyms. As a kid, everybody's bigger than you. And then 4 or 5 years later, a couple guys disappear, then they come back, they're 50 pounds lighter. And I realized that. I think also what's shocking, Doc, is how big people have been able to get. So I remember being at the Night of Champions, which is now the New York Pro in 95. Nasser El Somebody won that show at 275. Nobody had been 275. Maybe somebody got to like 245. Then he was 30 pounds heavier. Then somebody got to 285, 295. Then it was guys over 300. Now we see the strongmen competitors. They're huge. So, I remember I was supposed to do a seminar with Mike Jenkins, was supposed to do a certification at his place. He passed away. I think these guys are now over 400 pounds or almost 400 pounds. I guess genetically some can handle it and some can. Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah, well, you got someone like, Brian Shaw. Brian is over 400 pounds, but, he's also 6'10".
Yeah.
So, I've talked to Brian, I've met, Hathor and a number of these different giant men, and their frames are big. Like, I mean, if they ate normal, they'd probably be, I don't know, 3 something.
Correct.
Kaz, he presented for me 2018, and he's still 310. Like, I mean, he's just a giant man, and that's just genetics.
Right.
In general.
Genetics. Dan Jonos talks about, what's the 3 things that get somebody an athlete great is genetics, geography, and opportunity. So if I'm growing up in, the mountains of Georgia, I'm probably going to wrestle. If I am in Ohio area, I'm probably big into wrestling or, those things. Yeah. Powerlifting. Ohio is really such a, you got John Perillo, you got Elite FTS, Rogue, but even in the 80s, it was a lot of powerlifters were coming out of Ohio.
Well, that's Louis, Westside.
Yeah, Louis, Westside. Did Louis speak at Swiss before? He's not a big traveler.
Yeah, I asked Louis a number of times to come up, and he always basically declined. He says, "No, I got to train," and it was actually serious. Like, I mean, Matt Nickel talks about this in the sense of, Louis always says, if you want to know where I am at Christmas Day, phone the gym.
Right.
So he would train, 1, 2, 3 times a day.
Yes.
He'd always work with his, clients, and he just, he didn't present, which is fine, because I mean he did enough seminars. He's coming out with enough great information, and that's what I've always tried to do. And I talked to Matt Nickel about it, in the sense of I'm just trying to gather and put together as much good information from all the different presenters from different perspectives,
right.
And what works and what doesn't. You have the science of training, and these are all the PhDs and understanding, how the body works. And then you have the real world stuff. Mm-hmm. And so an example is that in 2001, I had Dorian Yates present on his bodybuilding style, 6-time Mr. Olympia, very heavyweight, low reps, low sets. Then in 2002, I had Lee Haney present, 8-time Mr. Olympia, lighter weight, high amount of sets, high amount of reps. Yeah. And, since I brought them in, I could talk to him personally. And I asked Dorian, I said, did you try, the higher volume? He said, yeah, it didn't work. And then I talked to Lee and I said, did you try, Dorian's style of training as far as heavier? He says, yeah, it didn't work. And so that's the art of actually training. Right. You have to determine how your body will actually respond from a muscle standpoint, neurological, hormonal, and everything's level at that time. Like, everyone's taking the drugs, everyone's doing the, the eating pattern, all that. And they both have great genetics, and they both train extremely hard. Like, I mean, they were completely dedicated, but it's completely different style. So that was, out of doing Swiss for the 20 years, that was probably the biggest aha for me, in the sense of the different types of training styles, and to try and determine what is the training style for you.
Yeah. And also, it changes as we age. You're in your 50s. I'm in my 40s. What I did in my teenage years even had to change in my late teenage years. And then things changed for me in my early 20s. And, we were mentioning the Dairy Queen. I was talking to my wife. I said, when did I start gaining belly fat? And we said, when I had worked at a middle school and started drinking coffee.
Oh, and wow.
Yep. And so I haven't drank coffee for like 3 years, maybe 2017. Yeah. 2020. Actually, it might be closer to 4 years. So interesting how we're mentioning these different nutrition protocols. And and even training. And I remember watching, like, they had that Perillo section on American Muscle Magazine. I was a kid, and I still remember they were interviewing one of his bodybuilders, and the guy said, yes, I do heavyweight and low reps, and, you know, lightweight and high reps, and I'm completely cycling my training. And sometimes I'm eating 10,000 calories a day, and sometimes I'm down to 2 or 3,000 calories. And so John, I guess, was taking this kind of the conjugate approach, and stopping people from, you know, adapting to training where they don't get, where they, you know, stop getting results from the training. It was also interesting how he was creating some of those unique pieces of equipment, his
Oh
benches
my
and
God, they're
whatnot.
amazing. Yeah.
You know, Don, I think my buddy Donnie Thompson has spoken. Has he spoken at Swiss Super D?
Yeah, a couple of times. I love Donnie.
He's such a sweetheart. You know, the first time I met him was 09. We spoke in North Carolina, along with, do you know Istvan Yavarek?
No.
Okay. He, you know, would like brought the popularity to the barbell complexes. So I remember they
Oh,
were.
yeah. Yeah, I did a seminar
Yeah.
with him. Yep.
Okay. Yep. I figured you would know who he was. So we all presented together, and Donnie had just, you know, won the, you know, first guy to total 3,000 pounds. I was like, oh man, Donnie Thompson's probably going to be like a aggressive badass. He
Nope.
was such a, like, he was such like a sweetheart kind of guy. I just remember he was
And
like
smart.
super smart, a
Yep.
blend of practicality, a blend of kind of exploration of what works, you know, and very, you know, he's an inventor. So, and sometimes I forget that he's also in his mid 50s, you know, lifting so heavy, still able to do that stuff. What are some like big, you know, you mentioned the aha moment of listening to Lee and Dorian being pretty much complete opposites of training. And I followed Dorian heavily. I had his VHS tape. I would watch Lee Haney's
Blood and guts.
workout with Lee Haney on Sunday mornings on ESPN. I recorded all that. So I've seen a lot of that stuff. What has been an aha for you, you know, any other kind of aha moments where you're at your own symposium and they're just kind of blowing you away? You're like, whoa, that was amazing.
I think the biggest thing is so in one of the Swiss symposiums, what I did is it was on every year I have a theme. So sometimes it's the low back, sometimes it's the shoulders, sometimes it's extremities. And so I try and, you know, give the presenters a focal point on what they can talk about. And so one year it was on the shoulder. And so I had the people from Active Release present. I had the people from Graston, they presented. The people from Muscle Activation, Greg Rajkov, he presented. Carol McNakin, who does the frequency-specific microcurrent. I had the applied kinesiology, the muscle testing guys present. I had some of the top rehab, Dr. Dale Buckberger, on different rehab protocols and exercises for the shoulder. What else did I have? Some of the training protocols, Dave Sandler, Ed McNeely. And they all talked about how to fix the shoulder in so many different ways. And so people actually walked out and they went, this is confusing. Which is the right way? And what they don't understand is that you have to do a proper assessment to determine what is the actual protocol for it. Would it be acupuncture? We did acupuncture there. We did laser. Like we did everything. And that's why some things don't work, because you didn't do the proper assessment. There has to be an inclusion, exclusion criteria. If what I'm going to do, will it make a difference? Like, I mean, if someone strains a muscle, I always work with a muscle joint nerve complex. Are we dealing with a muscle problem? Are we dealing with a joint problem? Are we dealing with a nerve problem? Or a combination of that? And what are the protocols in order to increase the strength, decrease the pain, and get back functioning correctly? And so you need a number of different tools. And that's where sometimes chiropractic fails, because, you know, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And a lot of times, you know, if it's a bolt, it's not going to work. So the more things that you can learn as a practitioner, the more powerful it becomes. And so that's what I've done over the past number of years. And in the past 5 years, I spent a lot of time on the brain. So how does the brain function? Because a lot of times I worked in a chronic pain clinic for 5 years with 13 medical doctors. And these were really, these are, their clients were that someone fell off a building 5 stories, landed on their back. They're never going to work again. They're in chronic pain all the time. And the definition of chronic pain is pain that you've had for longer than 6 months. And what that does is structurally change the brain so you become hypersensitive to it. So what are the different brain protocols? Because we see this in football, in rugby.
You become obsessed. I've had these things and I've seen it with athletes as I say, oh, you get obsessed. And now you start going down the rabbit hole of how do I fix my shoulder? All you think about is your shoulder, my knee. I mean, I did it with my knee. I did it with my shoulder. And I know that feeling. You're constantly obsessing over this pain area.
Well, you're obsessing and you get frustrated because no one can actually fix it.
Yes.
But it has to be the proper assessment. So a lot of times this is where proper imaging becomes important, as far as, do you take an x-ray, an ultrasound, an MRI, how much damage? And just because it's damaged doesn't necessarily mean that you need surgery, but a lot of times you may need it. And you would probably be a classic example where you tried everything else and nothing else worked.
Yeah.
For other people, it worked great. So the more things that you can learn, the biggest aha for me over the years has been, number one, to identify all the different protocols and understanding nutritionally and also training and treatment wise, bring in the best in the world, which is what I did with Swiss, have them converse, have them talk to each other. So all of a sudden you have Dr. Stu Mcgill, who's brilliant with the low back, talking to Bill Kazmaier about his training program. Like, how did you get so strong, and not fall apart?
Right.
And so, and that's one thing I really respected about Dr. Stu Mcgill is that he's a consummate, learner, in the sense of he's always trying to become better. What else is out there? And so at Swiss, he lives in the close to us here, but he would always be, a huge proponent and always, support us and come out and present. And his material is fantastic. And he loves working with, athletes and people that are strong and whatnot, which you normally don't get at a ACSM conference. They'll talk about all the physiology and research papers, on college people. But, at Swiss 2015, I decided to bring it back. My keynote presentation, there really wasn't one. It was Shane Church squatting 1,000 pounds.
Oh,
most people have never seen 1,000 pound squat. So I thought, you know what? Let's start with that.
Wow.
and actually, Dave Sandler, he hooked him up to Surface EMG to his glutes and his quad to see how much electrical activity was actually occurring as he's squatting 1,000 pounds. No one had ever done that before.
What?
So it was just, and you make it fun.
Sure. Learning has to be fun. You have to be excited about it.
Yes.
You also mentioned Dan Duchaine earlier. So I have his Body Opus book. I had it in the mid 90s when it came out. And I used to train at Diamond Gym, which was John Kemper's gym, which I always say it's like the West Side barbell of bodybuilding. So I've been around, guys doing steroids and openly doing that. And actually, when I was competing, our nutritionist kind of put me on the carb cycling diet that Dorian used. And then my training partner was on the steroid cycle that Dorian used. So, it was interesting for him, being not natural. He carb cycled for 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks. I started 6 weeks out. So it was interesting how he tweaked it for me. And, but Dan Duchaine's Body Opus book is high carbohydrate. And what you said earlier, I was thinking to myself, when I just read it, I often keep it, and I'm like, man, I would be so fat if I followed this high carbohydrate eating. But then I have so many memories. I remember hearing Gary Stridham talking in the 80s saying, I have a high protein, high carbohydrate, high fat diet. And back then in the 80s, bodybuilding was low fat, moderate carb, pretty high protein. So more like a, 30% protein, 55% carbs, usually try to be in that 12 to 15% fat. So now you, with all your decades of experience, Doc, don't you now see like vertical diet, right? With Stan Efferding, that's a pretty low fat diet minus the fats you're getting from lean meats. You're eating rice quite often. So you're actually having a moderate to high carb diet. And it's interesting how some of these, basically these older nutrition protocols are being brought, to life again that were out decades ago.
Yeah, and what you'll find, it's the same thing as training, is that you'll find the diet that works for you, and it's actually through experimentation.
Yes.
In 2016, I did a Swiss nutrition panel, and my question is that what are the different variations as far as the type of diet, but even more importantly, what are the tests, or what assessments can we do to determine what type of diet someone should be on? And there's a number of different protocols you can do. We still don't have sensitive enough tests or even understanding of the biochemical reactions that happen within the body. We're getting better. We're starting to see how important now, just in the past 5 years, the microbiome, the bacteria that you actually have, how important that actually is as far as metabolizing different foods, creating neurotransmitters, everything else of that nature. And then the manipulation of food with genetic modified, GMO type foods, that's the challenge that we run into. So the whole thing is that right now it's trial and error, as far as the different types of diets. And so we can pull some of the old diets, and a lot of times someone just slaps on a different name and, calls it this, or, whatever, which is okay for marketing. And people will get, you had the celery juice diet there for a long time.
Juice, yeah.
So does it work? Yeah, for certain people. Does it work for everyone? No, it's not supposed to.
Well, what if we, you mentioned the nutrition assessment, Doc. So what if we, a lot of what you're also talking about that happens at Swiss with the conversations almost sounds like just what I call practical. So your brother, if he ate ice cream or high carbohydrate diet, it had a negative impact on his emotions. And for me, when I talk about nutrition, I'm like, okay, when I eat that food, I feel like I need to take a nap. That's not a good food for me. Or I eat that food, it hurts my stomach. For example, people talk about avocados being so healthy for you. They hurt my stomach. If I eat, I could have like a little slice of avocado, but so yesterday we made tacos with bison. So my son loads up the avocado on it. And he's like, Dad, I go, dude, no avocado. Cause it just, my stomach is in pain, but he's fine with it. Or if my daughter goes to the Dairy Queen, I notice a change of behavior. And this also like a little, my ADD going here. 2 years ago, I went with some friends to Virginia Beach to work with Naval Special Warfare. And my friend is still good friends with John Perillo. And so he brought the protein bars and it's like the same wrapping, the same taste from the 90s, I was like, I can't believe it. It's like they taste the same. The wrapper didn't change. It was still that very plain, hard cardboard box. So
you gotta love John.
I know. I thought it was amazing. So who have you been in touch with, Doc? That's still been, like we've mentioned Dr. Morrow and John, that's been around for decades, but maybe they're not as popular on the internet for whatever reason, but you're still in touch with them. Like John Perillo is still building equipment, I think.
Yeah.
He's still got, it blows.
I was going to try and bring him up to Swiss 2020. We had to cancel, obviously, because of the whole situation. But I've always had a lot of respect for John and his innovative ideas as far as training and teaching the body on how to, the different angles to manipulate the stress on the body. Charles Glass apparently is very similar to that, where he uses different blocks and different styles of training to really try and maximize different parts of the body to make it look good. So I always really appreciate, Louis Simmons is like that. Like, I mean, they just do, it's just one giant experiment. Dave Tate is the same. Like, I was just down there last year doing a presentation, and he had the cable squat machine,
Yes.
and he had a specially built box that you can actually do box squats doing cable squats. And I went, he had this a slice in the actual box, and I went, wow, that's super innovative.
So it could go over around the cable.
Exactly. So that, everyone is trying to level it up, and depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish, of that. But we're getting closer to manipulate the body to, depending on the mechanics. We understand mechanics better. We're trying to get neurology, a better understanding. The pharmacology is also getting better. Supplementation of that. But a lot of it always, as far as I'm concerned, it always goes back to assessment. If we can have some good blood panels, if we can get some good training assessments, which is what I'm trying to do with Swiss, in the sense of how do you assess the body before you actually even train or even write a program? Because a lot of times, if someone has a restricted range of motion in their shoulder and it's weak for whatever reason, and you put them on a bench press, all of a sudden, they're going to, create an injury. And everyone goes, you say you bench 300 and you hurt your right shoulder. Well, it's because of the bench press. No, it's not, because the left shoulder is okay. Something happened on the right side. So there was some kind of dysfunction, some kind of overloaded the tissue in some way or manner that it basically caused an injury. And that's what takes out most people. As you know, you've been lifting for decades.
It just like makes me think that strength coaches are no longer, I don't even like to use that word. When I describe what I do, I say strength and performance. But I think as coaches working with athletes, we had no choice but to learn. I'm not a physical therapist, so I don't really like to say rehab, but we had to learn how to look at the physique and assess weak areas and build them up. But then what you're talking about to the more advanced levels, like muscle activation. So strength coaches are now kind of blending even some therapy in with what they do.
Well, you don't necessarily need to do therapy, in that, like, you have so many different tools that you can utilize and so many different protocols without getting into doing any active release technique or soft tissue manipulation or Graston or acupuncture or, adjustments, chiropractic adjustments. You don't, refer to someone that actually
refer to somebody who's
and
the
work
expert
together as a team. And that's what I've always tried to promote with Swiss, in the sense of we need to work together. Because I mean, for me to go into the gym is not the best use of my time. I would probably be one of the more knowledgeable ones in the gym, but my time is spent, as far as treatment, and I can refer out to other, intelligent, good strength coaches, performance coaches, and to work with, my patients that way for whatever reason that they have. And a number of my patients are personal trainers. They'll actually come in with their clients, and they'll see me doing all the assessments, me doing the actual treatment, and in real time, we'll create an actual rehab program and exercises that the trainer will, number one, understand what we're supposed to do and know how to do it. But even more importantly, the client is so impressed that they have a health team. They actually have a group of individuals that really care about them, that are going to work together. Because I mean, otherwise it's kind of like, if the trainer's going, I want to do this, if I refer someone over for, do some shoulder rehab, and all of a sudden they got them doing some wild kettlebell stuff because they took a course in it on the weekend, that's where it just goes sideways.
There needs, the Dr. Incledon, basically, Tom out in Arizona, like he created,
I know Tom.
Yeah, so he created under one roof that team, and I know it's like
Yep.
a cancer center, but they do the blood paneling there. They have a
Yep.
strength and performance coach, a physical therapist, chiropractic. That's really the ultimate, and I think that's the benefit when you. So I've coached at the Division I university level.
Oh,
You're in
wow.
the same building as the
Yeah.
athletic trainer, and then now they're building the physical therapists all under one roof, so you could go and have these modalities. And I look at all that, Doc, like it's all under the training umbrella.
Yep.
Everything is falls under the training umbrella. It's just what you might need more of at that time. So, we've got like 15 minutes or so here. So, COVID caused canceling of everything. Your symposium was canceled.
Yeah.
When do you normally have the symposium, and what round time?
I usually have it in the fall.
Okay.
And so I did it in 2015. I did it in 2016. I took 2017 off, did it in 2018, took 2019 off, and I had everything set up. It was going to be awesome for 2020. And then in the spring, when they shut everything down, and then once I saw that they canceled the Olympics in Japan, I went, you know what? They're going to shut everything down.
Sure.
So I just told everyone, listen, let's reschedule to 2021. I was looking at the spring. That still may occur. Probably maybe more in the fall, depending on how
Right.
this thing transpires. This whole thing was supposed to be, a 4 to 6 week, issue.
2
Now we're what?
weeks.
Yeah.
2
Now we're
weeks.
8, 9 months, and we're in total lockdown, and everyone is,
It's
having
craziness.
challenges there.
What,
So one of the things that I created, especially here in Toronto, this week, what they did is they shut down all the gyms for 28 days. And in fact, it'll probably be longer than that. They already gone through massive shutdown. So it basically really hurts to see the entire industry, training industry, the gyms, the personal trainers. Many of them are my friends, and they're really, really struggling. So I created a group, an alliance, and the Swiss Health and Fitness Survival Alliance. And what I want to do is try and get the chiropractors and any other health professional to help support the trainers, how we can refer to the trainers. And the biggest issue is that the age of the generalist for the trainer, where you walk into a big box gym, I think is done. Most people over the past 8, 9 months have figured out how to exercise on their own at home, watching YouTube or whatever it may be. And so, a lot of times the exercises are an accountability thing. I'm going to train because I paid for it, and I have my trainer. But that has decreased. And then I think just I don't know what it's like in the United States, but a lot of people are going to be hurting for money because they lost their job. They've decreased the amount of businesses that are available. So they just won't have that disposable income as much. So my focus is to have the trainers level up, become really, really good at something. I have 20,000 patients. I can fill anyone's, business. And in fact, I could fill, all the people, trainers in the city if I know what they actually do. Because most personal trainers and strength coaches, if you're training someone a couple times a week, you can only handle 15, 20 people. If you're doing
if it's
one-on-one.
one-on-one, we don't, my place is not one-on-one, it's small groups.
Yeah,
One-on-one tends to be reserved for really high income people or like celebrity pro athletes who don't want to
not
be
here.
amongst the group. But so
Not here.
one-on-one is big for you in
Oh,
Toronto.
yeah. Yeah, that's the way most of the personal trainers, they were all one-on-one. And so, you do have, sort of the group fitness type of aspect, whether it be, an Orange Theory or F45 or, any of those, style as far as circuit training, which is good too. There is no bad style of training. It just depends on what you're going to try and get out of it.
Right.
But the one-on-one training, which what a lot of the personal trainers, and they would charge anywhere between $50 to $120 an hour, depending on their skill set, depending on the abilities and everything else. But if the gyms remain open, that'll be interesting in of itself, because I mean they're really struggling. And so if I can get the health professionals to basically to refer to the trainers, but we have to know who you are. We have to like what you do,
Sure.
and also trust what you do. You know, as a person, are you a nice person? What's your knowledge level like? And then how do you actually even apply this, you know, for that? And so it's a real relationship building, because I've referred a number of patients to different trainers, and they just completely drop the ball on a lot of different levels. And so it makes me look bad. And also, you know, the same thing with the client. They don't feel
the tricky
as good.
thing I've seen, Doc, is that, you know, so I'm also full-time at a high school, and you know, talking about knowledge is, so I remember when I started there a year ago, when I was there my first 2 weeks, teams were not organized to train with me, but kids were going in like little groups from teams. And I remember saying, hey guys, my name's Coach Evanesh. I'm the new strength coach here. I'll be working with your team, but if you want me to train you today, you know, let me know. I'm going to have like a little group going on at this time, that time. They're like, no, I'm on my own program. So I said, maybe this hockey team has watched a lot of good strength videos or whatnot on hockey. And then I watched them train. I was like, what the hell? And I really assumed that because of the massive amounts of information out there, that they had more knowledge, and nobody proved it to me. And then the tricky thing that you mentioned was this disconnect. So if a kid goes to the athletic trainer, they stop training altogether, versus, hey, we could work around that shoulder.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you need a care, you know, whether it's a chiropractor, physical therapist, who still believes in you moving your body versus shutting everything down and just going through treatment. So I always feel like movement is the best medicine, and getting that blood flow is, you know, so it's still interesting that in this day and age, Doc, that there's still strength coaches who are against getting yourself cared for. And then you have, you know, whether it's chiropractor, physical therapy, body worker, and any of these, you know, areas, then they say, just do this for 2 weeks. Why not, you know, make it like a formula? It's a blend of all of that.
Yes. And that's the whole thing. But I think even more importantly, as far as for what I see right now, is that I'm just very concerned for the industry of the strength training, and also of the personal training. There'll be a number of people that are going to leave just because there won't be anything there.
Oh, I've seen it.
And we're going to lose a lot of really, really good people.
What do you think, you know, the answer, when I look at it, I would say, listen, don't wait for the gym to reopen, build your own in your house and go from there.
Absolutely. And even more importantly is that become really, really good at something. So Dr. Stu Mcgill, probably one of the premier people for low back assessments, training. You're very familiar with him, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he presented for me in the early 2000s. And then when I came back and did Swiss again in 2015, you know, I let Stu know, and I said, I'd like for you to present. And he said, well, what's the theme? I said, shoulder. He goes, no. I said, oh. He says, when you do low back, give me a call. I went, all right. So in 2016, I did low back. I phoned up Stu and I said, I'm doing low back. He says, I'll be there. And so Stu has focused in, and Stu's very smart with the shoulder. Very, very smart. But he has niched himself down so well that he can command any amount of money. He gets the respect of that, because he understands the low back is so complicated. You can't be doing low back and shoulder expert at the same time.
Yeah.
So for me, what I'm actually asking the trainers, and with this Survival Alliance, is that I want to be able to find in Toronto the best person that is strength training for running, strength training for cycling, strength training for soccer, strength training for rugby,
middle school youth athletes, age Yeah.
Any of that,
Age 10 to
but
12.
become very, very, so I have the confidence,
Right.
I use the metaphor as far as medicine. Medical doctors spend 8 years learning on how to become a medical doctor. After 8 years, they can specialize, and they'll spend 2 to 4 years becoming a specialist. Say they become an orthopedic surgeon. So all of a sudden, they become an orthopedic surgeon, but now they even niche it down more where they're just a shoulder guy. Where you have Dr. Miniachi, works out of Cleveland Clinic, probably
Yeah.
one of the top shoulder people in the area. You have McAndrews, same thing. You have people that are just take one joint and become really, really, really. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden they have a year-long waiting list because all of us have the confidence. And so that's what I'm, basically relating to all the different trainers that are out there. You could still have, my practice is about 50% people that lift weights. The other 50% don't lift weights, nor will they, because they're their 70-year-old mom. That I'll still treat them chiropractically. Whether or not you train is irrelevant. But I spent my entire, dedicated my life to the whole focus of the prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation of weight training injuries. So I understand it from a bodybuilding standpoint, from a powerlifting, because I've competed for many, many years, but also from a therapy standpoint. And so when someone comes in and they say, you know what, Ken Wetham, good friend of mine, he was squatting 840 at the time. And he says, my back hurts. I want to get to 900. And I went, perfect, let's do it. Any other doctor would go, why would you want to squat 900? I'm like, awesome. We got him to 900. And he goes, what do you think about 1,000? I said, let's do it. Let's do it. So the whole focus is that focusing on something. And so that all your marketing, all of your reputation, your articles, your videos is always very focused on the one thing. You don't have a medical doctor that is basically taking, courses in geology, in woodworking, and anything else. And that's what's happened in the training industry is they'll take fascial stretch therapy, and then they'll do a kettlebell and, all these different things. If you apply it to one thing, perfect. But if you take random stuff, you're going to get random people.
Sure.
And you won't get the respect from the health professionals because we don't know what you do. And we don't, we have a certain standard that we want to really work with.
It's also interesting, from a business perspective, is you have to choose a niche that actually is hungry, and those people do want that information. So, there's this marketer had passed away, but he was in direct response. His name was Gary Halbert, and he said the biggest advantage. Yeah. I figured you would have, because you had to do direct response mail.
Yeah.
He said the biggest advantage in business is a starving crowd, people who really want that. So when my back is injured, I'm starving to get my back fixed, or my knee, or my shoulder. For me, with, my underground strength gym, we're known for the transformation of weak, unsuccessful kids into turning them into just like beasts.
Perfect.
And so when a father or mother, they're embarrassed, they feel horrible, they're in pain watching their son lose so much, they find out about us. And
which is awesome. Now, for the personal trainer, as far as the hungry audience, you can only take in 15 to 25 people. You don't need a lot of people.
Think of have you had Brett Contreras speak?
He was supposed to come up, the glute guy.
So Brett, so Brett is,
he went after one muscle.
Muscle, and even it attracted more so women, but still men. And if you see his gym, which I guess I don't know how it's doing, I have to reach out to him. He's in California. They've been hit hard. Yeah, his gym is packed. Like he's so damn busy.
For one muscle.
Think
of that.
It's amazing. Yeah, glute guy. And he was a big research guy. He was big into research. He's got his PhD. So Doc, I've got to this will have to be continued. We could probably get
always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was a pleasure. I guess the next time we'd have to chat a bit about business, because you've been in business for decades. I started getting into this profession in 2002. multiple gyms still going. And, I mentioned this to you earlier, and people say this to me a lot, is like, sometimes the people teaching business don't even own a business. And
Yeah.
that changes things. I've always said it would be easy for me to tell you how to run a gym, but let me tell you, there's ups and downs. It's tough. And here's the things I do and why I could teach you how to do it. But if I taught business, my niche is not for people who want, hundreds of members. My niche is to show you how to have a low hassle, high profit, small facility,
Perfect.
1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet, and how to make a 6-figure income, make $100,000 working part-time, coach 4 hours a day and
Perfect.
have 100 members, 75 members at $200 to $300 a month brings you to about 10,000 gross per month.
And that's, you know what? And I really, really appreciate you saying that, because I mean, that is the type of, you want to have low overhead. You want to basically give high service and value of what you do. And you will survive through this whole COVID, pandemic. Because I mean, if you got high overhead, I got people that own gyms and, their rent is $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a month.
Yeah. And I've always kind of cautioned against too big. Then you purchase all this equipment, you're starting in debt, and now you make poor business decisions because you're desperate.
So you have Matt Nickel.
Yeah.
And Matt's gym is basically a storeroom off the side of a rink.
I saw the photos, 900 square feet.
We train there all the time.
It's amazing.
Well, we did. And he was like, I should, get a bigger place and all this. No, you can create an atmosphere in here.
Oh yeah.
Nowhere to hide. It's a lot tougher. Like, I mean, it's got no windows. I don't even know if he has any type of air ventilation.
No, he said we're either freezing in the winter or, sweating our asses off in the summer.
Yeah,
my one facility is small.
And he has more professional athletes than any other gym in Canada.
I think like 25 every summer he takes. That's a lot.
And a waiting list.
Right.
And like, so he can double or triple, but he can't take that many people on and do the job that he needs to do.
And think about
so you keep the overhead low, you give high value, high service.
Yeah.
You connect with people, but you niche it down, which is why I really appreciate, and a lot of people could really learn so much from you on how to do that.
Yes, I've, and I learned that from somebody else. Ryan Lee, you recall in the early 2000s, was coming out with a lot of the business. And so I luckily came across his information and invested in it, because I think the last comment here, Doc, is the business stuff I see today is, here's how you could get 30 to 40 new members a week or a month. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't care how many systems you have. It'll be a mess. It will be a mess. Right. I'm good. We get one new member a week, if that, because we have athletes that start in middle school, stay with us until the end of high school. And now we have the college kids coming back while they're on break. You're talking a 6-7 year lifetime of somebody staying with you. So Doc, this is to be continued.
Absolutely.
For the people who are listening, what website can they go to? Because I think the recordings are available for people to invest in, correct?
Yeah. So they can go to swis.ca, and the information about Swiss and the videos and everything else. I set up from 1999 to 2018. All the videos are up there. There's over 300 videos from all the
symposiums. Like a Netflix.
And it's a Netflix style where it's $7.98 a month. That's that you can cancel anytime. In fact, the first week is free, so you can go in there, watch as many as you want. You can cancel before the week is done. A number of people do that, which is fine. But yeah, you can see that. You can also see as far as if you want to get involved with the Swiss, if you're struggling and you need some coaching and help, and Matt Nickel's going to be helping me, and Serrano and Dave Tate, a number of people that really want to step up and help the entire industry on that. And then all the other information on muscle testing that I teach will also be there. So swis.ca. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, it's Ken Kinakin. That's at Ken Kinakin. And I always put up a 1 to 2 minute clip from one of the symposiums. So you can always watch that and be highly entertained.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having me on here, Zach. I know you got to head to work and take care of people.
Yeah, Doc, this was great. So everybody listening, people watching, go check out swiss.ca. And I have to make the trip, and I'll probably
you got to come up here.
I will not sleep when I'm up there. I'll be talking training and business with everybody nonstop.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. And actually, the symposium happens in the hallway.
Yeah,
the presentations happen in the ballrooms.
Right.
But there's a number of people. They don't even make it to the presentation rooms because all of a sudden you'll have Stu Mcgill talking to Bill Kazmaier, Matt Wenning, and Dave Tate, and they're all talking about training, and then Serrano will walk up, and you as just a delegate attendee can walk up and listen to what these guys are literally formulating and creating new ideas, and that's where you learn.
You have real people speaking, people really doing the thing, and so I always love that stuff. So everybody watching and listening, thank you. Please share with a friend and leave a review. And that's it, guys. So Doc, hang tight while I just stop this recording.